Hey, I'm Ossie from Three Monkeys Solderless, home of the world's best cables for your pedal board. So go get you some cables, whether you need audio cables or you need DC for your pedal board. Best stuff on the planet. Check us out, threemonkeysolderless.com. Do it now. All right, so we're back. And today I thought we might do Jose versus the One. So the reason being is I've been getting a lot of inquiries as to, what the differences are in the sound and functionality and things like that between the Marshmello the One amplifier and a Marshmello Jose amplifier. So I thought, in addition to just blabbing incessantly about stuff, might listen to the differences between the two, and you can kind of get an idea of what you think of them. Just to start off with, my feeling is that the One amplifier is what you would want to use for the first album studio sound. That's my feeling. I think every album has a slightly different sound. And this one is really, I think, for that. It has that splatty sound that's kind of unusual, which was, that we could hear in those overheads that I keep talking about, the eruption overheads, that you can hear how raspy and just overloaded the sound was before Don was able to kind of, shape it a little bit more. There's some interesting stuff about that maybe too, of how to do that or how he could have done that. I still don't know, but, some theories. And that splatty sound versus a sound that's more of like a hot-rodded Marshall or an interesting Marshall sound that is not splatty. And that might be going further on into something like maybe Fair Warning, I think. I think by, let's say Van Halen 2. So let me back up a little bit. So we have those. Maybe Fair Warning, definitely first album kind of thing. So we have the first album, Marshmello the One. Second album, it gets cleaner, right? That sound is much more what you would expect a Marshall Plexi to sound like when it's just, cranked up a lot. It sounds to me like it was probably a little louder than the first. I think the load might have been a little bit different, and that may attribute to why, the amplifier itself sounded different. But the second album gets a little bit cleaner. There's a little bit of a thicker sound to it, which may be more to do with how it was mic'd in the room sound. All right, and then we go, let's say, on to Women and Children First, and someone keyed me into I think it was a Jazz Obrecht interview, which talked about, which was with Ed, and Ed was talking about, I guess he had just gotten Women and Children First in the can, and he was saying, which is I had never. It was kind of never heard before, and it was kind of contradictory to what the lore is for like Ed Heads about the first album sound. And he was like, well, I really like the first album sound better than the second album sound, which was, contradictory to what I thought he was thinking. And he was like, I really wanted to kind of get back to that, but I didn't want to have to do it, like with, some post and everything like that. But I really wanted to get back to that, was sort of like his idea on the second album sound. I don't know if that was his feeling or whether he was kind of like, this is how it turned out. And it sounds to me like a little bit more like the first album, or whether he, took the setup again that he had for the first album and reused it. And and got a similar amp tone, which then, Don, did a treatment to, and although, the bones, the DNA was very similar, there was still a little bit of, let's say, processing differences or miking differences. So the core sound, like the amp to me, the closest he ever got to Van Halen 1 again was in Women and Children First, all right? And then you go Fair Warning, right? In Fair Warning, you start to get into this sort of like more modern guitar sound where, it could be something like, by that time, Jose's working with him for sure. May have put that sort of like Jose master on the thing. That could be the case. And then we get into, Diver Down, which I have no idea. All right, that sounds again like just a regular old amp. It may not have even been his Marshall. that amplifier or that album seemed like, although I love it and it has some of the best like boogies on it, like bow, 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 bow. It's just, it's a nutty album in terms of like, it has a lot of that boogie on it. The sound is totally different than a lot of Van Halen sounds, where the album tone. The drum sounds were incredible. I think the guitar sound was again different, and it went a little bit cleaner, maybe a little brighter. And then we get into 1984, which was a really sort of unusual sound again. First time recording in the 1984, it was his first time recording in those studios, the new 5150 studios, which was kind of like trying to maybe make a child between, Western Studios and Sunset Sound with, the equipment that Don had built into there. It's kind of interesting. I wonder if they had problems in the studio when they were starting it up and doing recording. In terms of, like how are you going to, get this room to sound good? Because I know, like, I've seen, let's say, other bands, big bands, who built themselves a studio, and it didn't quite work the way they really wanted it to work from the get-go in all the ways that they wanted it to work. All right, so it was like, well, we need this kind of, we're having trouble with guitar sounds, or we're having trouble with the drum sound, that kind of thing. And maybe 1984 was similar to that, in that, we see a lot of electronic drums. So maybe were they having some trouble with the rooms, right? Was the room sound not quite right? Maybe it was just, that was Alex was just looking for a change. But the drum sounds, lead me to believe that maybe there was an issue there. The guitar to me sounds like, there's some room sounds in there, but those could be added on with a lexicon. It's very possible that a lot of it was more, more using rack gear to get the sound, the ambiance, right? Using a lexicon for the big reverbs, maybe using the lexicon as well for the room, and kind of, really close miking the thing, or maybe even isolating it, the amplifier itself. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there, but that album has a really unusual tone. After that, it's kind of like I lost all interest. 5150 has some interesting sounds. Sometimes I think it's a Gallion Kruger amp that he used on that, but I don't know. I mean, it's a kind of an unusual sound. So anyway, let's get back to, sort of what I was thinking about doing was doing the differences between the two amplifiers. So let me grab the guitar, and we'll start with, what I used to do? I have the Jose in first. So let me switch over to the Marshmallow. So I'm going to have to adjust the camera to bring it up so you can see my goofy head in there too. So let's see. We're going to plug into the Marshmallow first. I'm using, again, the aux stomp. And for the Jose, I'm using a load box to get into the aux stomp. So it's sort of like a homemade aux amp top box, right? So let's see. We're going to go, this is the line out from the Marshmallow. And let's go into the aux input. There we go. And we should be good to go. So this is obviously the one, and I'm going to kind of demonstrate the splat. Let me mute the microphone here for a second so that you can hear just the guitar. And I'm going to turn up the second volume, which is like the splat control to me, unloading the first stage. And you can hear what I'm talking about the splat again, right? We're always talking about splat here. So here we go. I don't know why that made me think of House of Pain. Maybe isn't that how they did it differently, because it wasn't on the early demos, was it like something like that? I don't know. Anyway, enough of my broke finger guitar playing. So that's what I mean by the splat. You can hear how it sounded like, it sounds, has a, I don't know if it's like a harmonica and a comb kind of like deal. going on there. I got to move this stuff out of the way so I can see what I'm doing with the microphones here, so I can mute things. But you know, that's sort of that. Right? It has that really mushy, splatty kind of sound. So that to me is the main difference between the two amplifiers, is that this has that, this one does not. So let's listen to the Jose. So let me get into, plug the Jose into our little aux guy here, and we'll plug into, let's do the gain channel first. So we're into the high gain channel. So let's hear that. All right, so that doesn't have that kind of sound to it. A little bit, right? Every amp does, but that's in distortion, but it's not really like as aggressively there as it is on the Marshmallow. All right, so the next difference between the two would be that this obviously is a cascaded stage amplifier, meaning that there are more stages of gain put together to get its distortion, versus the Marshmallow, which is really a stock plexi design that's using a particular load line on the power tubes to get its distortion characteristics based on reflected impedance, whatever. So this can get more gainy. So I'm in the gain channel right now. I do have the volume up, which is the second stage, all the way up. But the first stage, which drives it, is only at 9 o'clock. So you can get a lot more of, let's say, cascaded gain out of the Jose than you can out of this. So let's listen to how much you could get out of it when I crank up this gain here. Now we're starting to get a little bit of splat. Right, but it stays that way longer, right? In another video, we talked about compression and how, you know, in multiple gain stages, the fact that they're driving each other allows the second stage to stay above the line of clipping longer than it will in a single stage amplifier, which leads it to have a different feel to it, right? So this will stay. It'll stay above that line of clipping longer, right? Then we'll, let's get into the Marshmallow again. Then this one will. Obviously, it's a little quieter too, because it's not all, you know, tons of gain stages put together. But right. So that would make this amp more, in a sense, dynamic, in that it can go in between the sort of clipped areas and the cleaner sounds more easily than it can, but that this will. It'll move up and out of it, where this one in those places will stay above the line of clipping. So for like Van Halen 1, to me, it's much more like up and down versus flat, right? Let me turn this down. And then it'll... It'll have, you know, a little bit of a cleaner sound when you roll down the volume. So... Now we could demonstrate the rolling back the volume on the guitar in the Jose. drop the power cord. All right, so plug into this gain channel. And so it really won't clean up, right? From that spot. If you turn your gain down quite a bit, or better yet, if you were to, you pull that out and you did defeat the gain stage, go into the normal stage, right? The normal input, which will just allow us to have sort of a standard plexi kind of levels of gain, but granted, it has the Jose Master on it, which adds something because it has some diodes in there. Right? So it has, in that case, it gets a little, it doesn't get quite the same as the Marshmallow, but it gets really kind of close. I think it does. And if we roll off. So through like the regular channel, you're going to have, you know, the ability to get closer to, you know, the Marshmallow sound, although it's not quite the same, but it does, like, for instance, if you were to go into the gain channel, I think, you know, like, oh, where are we? Oh, we defeated it. We got to push it in so it works again. But right there is sort of like, you know, where I think the Jose really works well for things. So for like stuff like Fair Warning, I think I'm torn, but I'm really sort of like leaning towards sometimes the Jose too. I mean, it's kind of a good place to be in where you know, both are, it's like splitting hairs. Both are usable in this kind of a situation. So once again, you know, it's sort of like, you know, where did Jose come into the picture? Granted, again, that this amp is, you know, I'm running through a load box, right? So it's going to have that kind of a loaded sound as well, right? If you were to plug this maybe into a cabinet, it might have a slightly different tone to it than it would, you know, using the load box, which is, you know, closer to being like the, you know, the slave sort of setup, and closer to being, you know, the fixed sort of reflected impedance back to the power tubes, which will affect the way that they work as well. So maybe that has something to do with why, you know, right now this amplifier is kind of, you know, it's getting close to the Marshmallow. If we were to go into this, and I did drop the power cord. I dropped my cord back here, so we're gonna have to replug it back in. It sounds, I don't know. It sounds just as good. So, there's some different flavors in there. But you know, it's a Marshall sound. It's not a stock Marshall sound, that's for sure. Either one of these, and they kind of, I don't know. They share a little bit of DNA, they may have like, it's sort of like a sniper rifle, which, dialed into a particular range, right? So it's sort of like, well, if you just click a couple of, adjust the windage, elevation, for this yardage, you hit Van Halen 1, you take the caps off the scope and dial in a little differently. Now you can hit sort of like Van Halen or Fair Warning or Van Halen 1 with this, but you set it a different way. It hits for Fair Warning. I think, that may be what's going on with Ed, right? Like all of his amplifiers over the years, they all shared this similar DNA. They all sounded a little bit differently, but it was some subtle differences. And you're like, oh, I could see, how this could be the same thing going through all those years, yet there may have been modifications to there. So yeah, I don't know. It's like I like both of the amplifiers. I think, it might be interesting to see what would happen if you did, put a Jose Master sort of deal on like this. But it wouldn't even be like, I don't think you would want to put the master so much on it as the clipping circuit and just see what that does. I don't know. And just like load it some differently, or put the different load on this guy and variac it. This amp is not variaced right now, by the way. It's at full wall voltage. So there's another difference. So, there's is it apples to apples? Is it apples to oranges? Is it Granny Smiths versus Fuji apples? I don't know. But that's sort of like how they sound and how, they work differently. And you can probably do it either way, So I don't know if that helped answer any questions or made things more confusing. I don't know. But I tried, right, to give you there. But I like both for me. Sometimes, one hits a little different than the other. So for me, I think this guy would be, I don't know how you could do either. I think you could do either. It's up to the end user. The end user might say, you know what, I really hear that one better for this. And maybe totally opposite of what I think. And that would be normal, because we all hear things a little differently, and our expectations of what we want to hear, affect the end result of how we interpret what we're listening to. So one may have the thing that you like that you're excluding everything else out of, and that might make a decision. So there you have it. I thought I might go over to the YouTube channel again and just look at some comments, because I think there were a few, just to say hi to everybody that sort of like commented or whatever. So we got Joe was asking, I was talking about, I think, how my computer was dying, and it was suggested to take the back off and blow it out. Not saying you don't, but a lot of people don't. Yeah, I clean, when I go in there to do, it's a laptop, so I'll take the bottom off and, vacuum it out, or, sometimes I'll just take the air compressor and blow. There's some vents behind there that can blow some stuff, or blow the keyboard a little bit, and, that kind of thing. I think it's just, honestly, I think it's an operating system on an older processor issue. So, I don't know if computer companies would be devious enough to like write in programming where a different processor might be more stressed when you run the newer operating systems on there, the new OSs, and then, start to really, put a high demand on the system where it starts freaking out a little bit. So, I think we're looking into getting another laptop, and hopefully that will, improve things quite a bit, because this laptop is a little old. All right, so next. Jamie, what's up, Jamie? This was such a this is Sunday Talks last week. This was such a deep dive. We got White Snake, Def Leppard, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Tina Turner. It doesn't get much deeper than that. Sounds ultra authentic. Nice trip, man. I wish there were some more mellows. I dropped the ball. Now, there are going to be more. I ordered more Transformers, so I'm going to make another 10. And then we'll see where things go. We'll come up with a new operating system for the marshmallows, so we blow up all the old marshmallows and y'all got to buy a new one. Craig, what's up, Craig Cordell? Ossie, the Van Halen one tone you achieve with room sound summary sure seems to be the ticket. Well done. I think obviously in my mind, the rooms do present a huge amount of opportunity to create sounds, right? To parallel signals, right? Parallel chains, close mic a little bit further away, a room mic. Summing those all things, you tend to get some interesting results. And then if you pan them around this stereo stage, so to speak, from left to right, you can really get, interesting comb filterings and psychoacoustic effects and spreads that, it's an inexhaustible supply of smiles. Let's put it that way. It's just awesome. All the things that you can do. All right. Mick Nobody was saying Panama 1984 Tone Chase. That was like from 5 years ago. I did a video of just this giant pedal board I made with all kinds of crap on it. And I was doing, I guess, Panama. And says, how do we know it's not Eddie? I mean, we always see her feet. Sounds pretty Edward to me. How do we know it's not Eddie? Because it sucked. That's how we know. Because I was playing it. It's obvious. I'm just trying to get sounds. And I can't play this thing. It's fucking crazy. I'll tell you, that is, oh my, just to even think. All right. So, I'm just gonna, this is like stuff that you think about and then you realize, that Eddie was on top of these professional guitar players, these gifted ones that we all know and love. And just thinking about Eddie, you realize he's on top of Mount Everest and you're somewhere in Death Valley. Not only do you have to fly halfway around the world, it's all the way up there, right? It's so amazing. So like, for instance, so where you pick on the string, I smashed the computer with my guitar. What the hell's wrong over here? So where you pick on it, right? So right? It gives you different tones. So for I think he's picking in different places on the strings sometimes. Like for certain notes, like the high E's, sometimes I think he'll come closer to the bridge and then sometimes move further away. You'll definitely notice, and I've talked to some people that will recognize where I'm going with this, but like he has like all these different kind of like pick sort of pick holds, right? Sometimes he'll be holding it like this, so then he'll switch it to here. Sometimes he'll hold it like this. Sometimes he'll and he'll change it up while he's playing. And I'm like, what is this on purpose? It certainly seems to be, because it's consistent. So while he's doing all that stuff, he's trying to get different pick flavors with different holds on the pick to create different tones. And to even think of being able to do that while you're playing guitar and running backwards as fast as you can on a stage, it's just not something I can relate to. I just don't understand that, right? I mean, I know I do understand it, and that's what, like, you realize how insane that is to be able to do all that kind of stuff. Just how he can switch everything around, his grip, where his mute is at, where he's picking at, his grip hold. It's mind-boggling. So, to sort of chase his sound, you'll notice that like things, and I'm sure this was the case with him, right? He always listened. So they said he had great ears, right? People worked with him, said he had great ears. I wasn't thinking that he had great ears. I don't think they meant like that so much that he knew what like amplifiers sounded great, so much as he knew how to make them make his sound great in different places. So he would, so for instance, we always talk about like the chords and the tunings, right? Trying to give that kind of a tone. Different places for playing the same chords, different inversions. I think he would also, pick in different places. And then move the pick around, right? So if he wanted to do some palm muting, it might be trying to get a little pick scrape in with the chug, right, to give it a little bit of a different sound. So for something like Unchained, I can hear him going at the same time that the flanger is sweeping, right? So he's like, right? So you're hearing. And that's what I think he meant by like great ears. So he'll instinctively know that if I'm trying to play this, he'll find a place where it sounds right. Up too high, it doesn't sound as good as if you pick more towards the neck. Right, it has a little more vowel-y sound to it. Is where he's going to mute his and pull off how long the mute's going to go on. Where he's going to kind of, pick higher notes. How he's going to angle the pick. Is he going to touch it with the edge? Is he going to pick it with the tip across on the edge? You hear that all through his music, right? You hear that, the tinks that he does, which you can lose if you don't do, all right. So if you're kind of picking with the up and down this way versus doing this, right? So versus. Just all kinds of crazy stuff that he's looking to kind of, enhance the sound of what he's getting. So, getting close to his tone, sometimes you'll get it right. And you're like, this chord sounds right. And then you'll go play a chord in a different place. And you're like, that sounds terrible. So you might have to find the place where Eddie played it. And then all of a sudden the tone starts to work again. It doesn't sound as nasally, or it doesn't sound as like bright. He's always working out ways to make the guitar sound correct by the way he's sort of playing, where he's playing on the neck, how he's holding his pick, where the mutes are, where on the string he's picking, he's adding accent into it. It's just an amazing thing to kind of like get into. It's endless, but it's just the way he was, right? I'm guessing he probably, this kind of thing was like very natural to him, that it wasn't contrived. It was like, oh man, I'm going to play it over. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to do this. And then he would just move his hand around. And then over time it became, he didn't even think about it anymore. It's like, oh, when I play, these kinds of things, I do it here and then I move this. It's just something that, it's talent for the game, so to speak. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's good for today. I wanted to kind of like touch in and go over a few of these things. So I appreciate you guys watching. Oh, and that amp is on reverb, I think, anyway, if anybody wanted to grab it. Whatever. But we're going to continue this. I've got some ideas for some projects that I'm always saying that. I'm just lining them up, waiting for parts to come in. Things have slowed down a little bit. I got to do a few things, but there's going to be some other projects coming out soon. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.